Oh, how wonderful to see everybody. We have all been practicing together for a while. It's quite wonderful. One of the benefits of taking a break is it kind of renews the appreciation for the practice and for the Sangha when we come back together. It's like, oh, okay, I'm back at it. And it's also useful to take time off just to get a bead on one, how helpful it is to be practicing in a Sangha. And when we're all not seeing each other all the time, we can forget a little bit. And also just to recognize when we're not constantly having reference to the source of practice here, how valuable it is, because it's not found elsewhere. It is a bit when your Dharma eye is open, it's everywhere. But in the general workaday world, we don't have a lot of Dharma instruction coming at us formally. So one of the reasons probably why every January we turn ourselves back to vows is because we're starting up a new year. And it's good to kind of return to, all right, what do I intend? How do I really want to activate my days in the right way? How do I want to embody this life in the right way and be reminded? So it's why we renew our vows, and also why we practice with precepts on some kind of regular basis. Just to remember the basics, the basic tools that we have inherited through this tradition. So if you want to live with a mind of awakening, you have to live in an awakening way. It's not just we do a vow, but we have to have a sense of how to live it. Because our everyday life, a vow is a great big thing, and it is timeless. To take it up again with a lot of intention to say, okay, what are my vows? We all together inherit the great vow, the great Bodhisattva vow for awakening, and it's called the Great Vow for All. So if we can't remember our vows, or if we can't get clear about what our vows are personally, we can always come back to the basic Bodhisattva vow, which is to be present for the sake of all beings, to be aware and pay attention, because it affects all of life. Practice vows. So we have the great vow, the great Bodhisattva vow, and we also have practice vows, which are very individual. And it's one of the things that we're taking up in our vow session that's coming up. And if you haven't, some of you have been hearing about it all the time, but if you haven't been reminded, that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. And it's a wonderful process for step by step looking into what have I missed in my own life and my own intentions and my own challenges that I could actually articulate in a way that would be helpful to me for my practice. They help us go deeper into the practice of liberation. And they lay down a wise path that heads us in the right direction. And especially living day by day in our workaday situation, vows keep us firmly on the path of taking refuge. taking refuge, remembering refuge, remembering where it lies, and not to fall into a careless refuge with things that actually are going to deliver us into evil, evil ways that undermine our happiness and well-being. So there are many distractions that can easily tip the balance in the direction of the distractions. So we actually end up reinforcing our desires and aversions and all of the habits that are really tightly held around a small sense of being separate from everything else in the world, and binding us even more to this life of desire. So when this happens, we're taking desire as our guide. We're taking refuge in desire, or we're taking refuge in a feeling that there's something missing, or we're taking refuge in anger, or something is wrong. So picking and choosing, desire, aversion, which is another form of desire to have something be gone, right? Keeps us tethered to changing conditions, to a sense that conditions shouldn't change. This comes up in so many ways. I'm just always so surprised in my own, when I am aware that I'm in a state of suffering to some degree. It always comes back to forgetting change as the basic character of the flowing nature of conditions. So desire and aversion predictably leave in their wake dissatisfaction and anxiety. So there are these various things. If we want something, we may get it, but then we're afraid of losing it or it being taken from us. Or we don't get it. So we get it, but we lose it. We lose it, or we fear losing it. Or we don't get what we want, and we're still dissatisfied. So dissatisfaction leads us around by a ring in the nose, one way or another. And it's all tied in with feeling separate from the completeness in each moment, that there's something not right, not enough. So our vows remind us, our way of holding steady, and ground us in a benevolent discipline. Do you ever get the feeling of the discipline of practice? Practice as a discipline? You know, when I was teaching parent education, I met a parent education elder who was she was so clear and wonderful. And she said, so what is discipline? Discipline is giving life to learning. That's the root of it, etymologically also, giving life to learning, which is exactly what we look at, is how do we live our vows? How do we live the teachings? How do we put them to practice? How do we embody them and enact the wisdom of these guiding teachings, so that it brings benefit, relieves us of suffering and difficulties, and mistaken identity. Bringing learning to life, or life to learning. So it actually, another way to say it is that when we really appreciate the benevolent discipline of practice, we make it useful. It makes our life useful. It makes everything that comes along useful, as opposed to good and bad. Even though we may still feel good and bad. So we speak of awakening. What are we awakening to? Well, just the true conditions that we're subject to. These words are so easy to say, but it's not always easy to, or we may not always remember to say what are the conditions of this moment. Our view may be right here, and it's much more important to actually notice what's right out here. I'm thinking, we've just gone through a time of visiting family members and people who don't necessarily practice. I think it's really important to remember that one of the things that we all do is we're all holding the same intention, a very similar intention. But that's not the intention of everybody. And so we come to members of our family who are serving very, very different intentions. And it helps us to remember that when we're wanting to work on being harmonious, when to engage and when to not engage difference, when to explore and how to explore differences. And sometimes you can very fruitfully explore different views with family members. Sometimes there is no open door for that. So it's important to recognize that. So that lies outside of our habitual, the gates. Dharma gates are boundless. Meaning, it's one way that we say that. Dharma gates are boundless. There is no boundary. We never know. You never know what else there is that's really relevant and operating on our current conditions. Which is, one thing leads to another in these teachings. So that leads to don't know mind, maintaining don't know mind. So that can be a vow. That can be a particular vow. I vow to maintain an open mind. Mind that doesn't know, even when I think I do. Especially when I think I do. That's when it's hardest, when you really think you know. I don't know about me. That's when it's hardest to stay open, when I really know. Not only do I know, but I know better. So being awake in this moment, and clear-eyed, takes a very firm commitment to that. And it's really easy to drift off from that intention to a habitual distortion. And especially in relationships. We all have relationship patterns that we inherited, we've practiced, and we've practiced with relationship partners in certain very particular patterns, right? Each bring our own bundle of past experience into each new experience or each new moment. And especially when we think we know somebody really well, or somebody knows us really well, what don't we know? How well do we know ourselves? How well does the other person know themselves? I mean, it's really interesting to be looking at, and it's my particular interest. I don't know if everybody's that interested, but so interested in how we're all walking around in very, very different mental universes. And it's helpful to be aware of what makes up our own. So that's one of the things we'll explore at the vow session is, how we come to the view that we hold of who we are, what the world is, how things operate, how money functions, how you should be in relation to money, how you should be in relation to beauty or success or all of those things. Because usually when we have pretty fixed ideas about that, that's the source of a lot of suffering, because things don't go that way. I mean, we can be pretty sure that they won't go that way. They go the way they go. So, as Buddhist practitioners and practitioners of Zen, we have this universal vow, great vows for all, which we can't keep. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. It's a huge vow. I was very relieved when Chosen explained that one of the things we know we can free other people from is our own anger, our own greed, our own stuff. If we can do that, that's pretty good. The other thing is that, how do we do that with our intimates, and how do we do that with our acquaintances? How do all of the ways that we create suffering for people we don't even know that well? So that leads me to think about, I get a good listen every day when I'm out walking at Bald Hill. And some people are walking along and they're bright and they're open, and some people are like, or just very distracted. They are just very distracted and totally lost in thought. It's really helpful to, to make a point of really observing who are you meeting casually as you go through the day, and what is their state of mind? Because if you want to practice the Bodhisattva way, you want to respond. You don't try to call somebody who's really dark to be friendly with you. Maybe it's enough, maybe it's helpful just to raise a prayer for their well-being as you walk by silently. There's so many gradations of how we can modulate our way of being, depending on the particular conditions we're meeting. So one of the things that Chosen points out in her Vow-Powered Life, which is a wonderful book on vows, is that it's important not to confuse the vow with the means for accomplishing the vow. And she quotes Gandhi, who said, "My religion is based upon truth and nonviolence. Truth is my God. Nonviolence is the means of realizing God." So that's another really wonderful inquiry, is what is your God? What is most important for you? And how do you realize it? How do you bring it forth into your life? What are your strategies? So, there are so many different kinds of vows, and one that we study more closely is the reactive vow that many of us made when we were young, in a family where something was going on in a certain way. One of our parents was a certain way, or a sibling was a certain way, and we made a commitment, I'm never going to be like that. So then we figure out how are we going to keep that vow. And one might be to withdraw. Another might be, I'm always going to be smiling and nice no matter what. Or I'm really going to work hard and be very earnest, or, so whatever those are strategies. And usually we work with them, or you don't get enough attention. So you become extremely helpful, or you become extremely hell-bent, really making a lot of trouble just to get attention, no matter what kind of attention, you just need it. Those are the strategies. And that's one of the things that we encounter when we do Zen work, Dharma work, is what have been our strategies, and how do they still work, and how do they not still work, and how could we be more flexible and have more at hand when we need it. So one of the things that I discovered was when I started, I was always super nice. Nicey, nicey, nicey. And that meant, Chosen pointed out, that I could never just be cool and firm. And it's like, that had never occurred to me. So anyway, that's just an example of how useful it is to, and how we become so much more versatile and flexible when we really understand the strategies we've adopted to bring about outcomes that we really need for our sense of being okay or safe. This is all involved. This is all part of that we consider when we think about what are my vows, what do I vow, and what is asked of me by my vows, what am I asking of myself. So the last thing I wanted to do before questions is talk about what to do when you really blow it. Now, I don't know about you, but I do occasionally really blow it. And and there is a need to recover the sense of being okay, and recover the confidence that that this practice is good, is reliable. And so it's so important when we blow it we can disappear into shame, which is a sure signal that we've blown it, right? But the first thing to do is to recognize the sensations in the body of regret, distress, whatever you want, whatever word is the best word to attach to the sensations. Sometimes there is no word, it is just terrible. You feel really bad. So you want to go into the body, and that's one reason why we really emphasize that in Zen practice. The first thing we do is we sit down and we do a body scan, and we go to the breath, so that we learn how to tune into the body and have it become kind of automatic. It's always available, this ability to tune in, even when we're very distressed, especially when we're very distressed, to tune in and to be able to calm yourself. How do you calm yourself? Well, you may say things, if you've really blown it, chances are the things that you're saying to yourself are not going to be calming. They're going to make it worse. So what are the things that you will say to yourself? And look at that and bring up the voices that are compassionate, understanding, have insight, and look into what were the conditions that made you blow it. What are the conditions that happened there? You know, were you very hurried? Were you very tired? Are there many things you wanted to say and you never said them to somebody, and all of a sudden, blah, you let it out? I mean, there are just a lot of different ways this happens. So looking at what can I learn from this, that's part of our practice. What did I learn when I've done something? I take responsibility for my own behavior and its consequences. What can I learn that I can use so that I have choices instead of I go down an automatic track? What will I do next time instead? How could I handle it next time? What would I need? And then, of course, forgiving, self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness. And that's one of the things that we do when we do a unit on metta. You know, we practice forgiving the self and loving the self and feeling, I am whole and complete. My intention is to live well as a caring human being, and to really feel that in the body. That in itself can be very challenging if you've never felt that. It's really important, really valuable. Of course, making amends to the other person, if that's possible, and if it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate, and it's not always possible. Especially if somebody dies after you've had a big fight. I know has been the case for some people. But it is possible, actually, to atone. That's why the atonement chant is so important. It's possible to atone for past harm and to send it out with full intention to bring ease to those who've been harmed. It's really part of our life as a practitioner, is to send out blessings and atonement for past harms. And then we start over. You know, one of the things in parent education that is really helpful, especially with little people, just start a pattern in a family with kids. Like they have tantrums. One of my kids just tantrum like crazy. And it was always important after learning to calm the body and all of that, to say, okay, let's start over. Okay, start over. So we start over. We always begin, the bell begins to sit. We start over. So be thinking about your vows. Write them down. Recite them. In whatever way they come to you. Whether they're clear or not so clear. It's all right. Just whatever we approximate. We begin to shape our vows as our vows shape us. It's one of the great gifts of this practice, is the emphasis on vow. That even if we are not practicing it all the time consciously, it is working on us. So, may we all awaken. And I don't even know, what's the final thing to say?